I added Ridgeline in here, which is whalebone, synthetic whalebone made of plastic. I was a little bit on the fence of buying it because it is a piece of plastic which is not recycled, but I really needed it to construct the structure, to add structure to the sleeve, and this is the look I'm basing this off of, so there was really no other way that I could add some structure in here other than using that transparent whalebone. The fabric, it's organza and it is semi-transparent anyway, so you can see my hand coming through the back, so I really needed something transparent, just as transparent as the organza, and this is how that whalebone typically looks like. I have to straighten it out a little bit because it tends to curve in and add this kind of like a droopy side, and I wanted to just go straight out. I tried it on my body first, but it does kind of curve in to the other side and start laying like this, so I'm gonna have to find a way to fix it. I am gonna repeat the same thing on the other side, so you'll see me just cutting down the plastic piece using a saw that I found at my father's workshop. The only thing that I have to do is also unpick the inner seam in here because I've sort of closed off this ending, and if I don't push the Ridgeline right to the edge, everything is going to be stiff and then this edge is going to be droopy, which is not something I want, so you'll see me do it now. I never had a mannequin in Estonia before, and this one is sort of soft but firm enough not to change the shape once I poke it with a billion needles. And I've cut out this bodysuit that you saw me cut and haven't really worked around it yet, just because I have to have a jazzing machine and I will have access to it a little bit later. And also, I don't think I've shown you that, but I started sort of like a giant mood board on the wall where I've added my current range plan, added like the physical photos of the range plan that I have. I should be adding look number 3 in here as well, and well, basically like added different photos of the process of the project and scans and like fabric pieces that I feel like can inspire me to do something else. I also tested this little thing out, as I have an idea to make this as a handle for a bag, and those look like receipts that are folding off, not receipts specifically, but like different papers and documents, which can be a little bit difficult to do in Estonia just because I don't really have access to printing places, and all the access that I have is very expensive. So I tested this one out, obviously very ugly because the wire could not be bent into shape as I wanted it to, but my dad and I will figure it out a little bit later on. And thanks to this, and because I've been looking at my range plan every day for a while, I don't think this one fits in here. Even though this is like one of my favorite looks, I feel like I have to change it. And also sorry for the quality, like iPhone quality, what can you do? But I love this look, but I'm just not sure that it fits in here anymore. What do you think? I have a couple of fake leather pieces left over from a project of a tailor in whose studio I worked for the past couple of weeks, and he was making furniture and he has a lot of pretty large pieces of fake leather left over and he didn't know what to do with them, so I was very happy to take them from him. And look, this piece is quite giant, it's almost like A2 in size, so with me using even the tiniest pieces, those giant pieces can be very handy. Right now I'm testing out a patchwork method. I'm thinking of creating passport covers for the project, sort of like promotional pieces, perhaps I could sell them. And yeah, corona times, like passport covers are not the most needed thing at the moment, that's true, but I can keep them for later and just as a token of this project. I feel like that would be very logical for me to introduce passport covers in the project because of the topic of it. Because I'm sewing a curve here, I'm going to make little incisions, little cuts in places where the curve is the most drastic. So probably this section and this section are quite straight enough for me not to need those cuts, but I'm probably going to have them from here on out, so like make about 5 to 7 cuts, so that when I open the seam up and try to top stitch it like here, it will lie flat. I don't really use fake leather that often, so those off cuts are sort of a mystery for me. Even though this is a sample, I really don't want to waste too much of that because it's a synthetic fabric. I don't want any of that to go into trash bin, so I'm trying my best to make this perform well. And what I'm going to be sewing, I'm going to be sewing on the front of that side, and I'm just going to be opening those bottom pieces every stitch I go through. So I've stitched this area through, just flip it inside out, check whether or not it's open enough, and stitch a little bit more. paperwork and I've cut it out for my passport cover. It fits pretty much the same as it would open, but I added extra pieces, extra flaps that would go almost halfway till the sleeves of the passport, and I am going to be constructing a lining for it out of leftover fabric pieces from the freelance work that I did, because the inside does not look so pretty. I've used different threads over here and I had to make a couple of knots, and besides you see the slits of that leather that I showed you, so obviously it has to be lined for better use. My mum decided to have a huge closet clean out and she ended up with about 5 or 6 bags of clothes and shoes and accessories to donate. So a couple of the pieces were a little bit worn out to the point of no return, so she decided to give them to me so I could dismantle them into pieces. And I was very happy about that because I ended up with a bunch of zippers and haberdashery and different metal pieces that I could use in my later project. Most of the bags were synthetic, either leather or fake fur, and that fake fur had an animal print which I really don't like, but I still decided to save it because I was thinking of organizing like a small workshop for people to come and create small toys which we could later fill with my fabric offcuts, which I've accumulated a bunch of during the past couple of months that I've been in Estonia, and then we could bring those toys to orphanages. I'm in the second stage of making a bag, finally created a little pocket for the inside of it. I have lining pieces, those are going to be the outside of the bag, and this is the side piece that's going to go on the edge to create some volume to it. I'm making like a shoulder bag, 90s, 2000s inspired, and I'm also not gonna double it in a professional way, I'm guessing, so I really want the inside to have bias binding to be finished, so I'm gonna have to find areas like this which have a lot of layers and cut them through the middle, because otherwise bias binding plus this edge is not going to be able to go through it. This is obviously a bag sample, not a final thing, but I was still trying to make it as realistic as possible, so in some areas I had to do hand stitching, and in here you see me hand stitching the bias binding from the inner side to the inner main portion, because I was trying to make it lie flat, and when you turn the bag inside out I was hoping that the main pieces which are creased would overlap over the side piece, which did not end up being the case, but I am fine with it. It's still a sample. I know next time I would have to do the bias binding from the outside so that those lines would be exactly visible, and I could probably later pipe them in with that metal wire that I pulled out of the recycled bag. I had some leftover pieces from the bags that I made and I didn't want to waste all this hand stitching because it took quite a while, so I'm making accessories out of it, and I'm thinking of making earrings. I've cut them down a little bit to fit the shape that I like, and now I'm gelatinizing them. So this is a solution of half a tablespoon of gelatin and 100 milliliters of water, and I think that should be enough. I watched like a video of how to gelatinize things, so I'm going to try to flatten now into the shape that I would like. I will deliberately keep some three-dimensional pieces such as this crease, and will probably later trim down those like spiky edges, and this will yield me 2 earrings, which obviously a little bit playful just because they're made out of fabric, but hopefully are going to be interesting enough. I know that you have to squeeze the moisture out just because otherwise you will see specks of gelatin kind of reflecting the light, and that is not something I want to do. Now they're all dry, but they are pretty stiff, which is something I was going for with pieces like this. So this one kind of sounds like, I don't know, thin cardboard, I guess. But with this one, I was thinking of leaving those wispy pieces just the way they are. But because I was planning on them going as earrings, I don't think them touching the face is the best idea because it is pretty scratchy. You can kind of hear it with this as well, so I'm probably going to have to trim down those wispy pieces in order for them to be at least somewhat comfortable. Even though this is a tester batch, I have to play around with them as if they are the real thing, because otherwise if I ever get to developing them again I would have to start from scratch. But now all I have to do is just push the metal thingy through the holes of the fabric, because it still is pretty soft, like relatively bendable, so I'm pretty sure that those sections of fabric will be spreadable pretty easily. I'm cutting the edges off with regular paper scissors because that's generally the rule that you want to follow, is avoiding very stiff materials and trying not to cut them with your main fabric scissors, because materials such as plastic or like thin metals or wires are way too stiff for your fabric scissors. They're going to get dull very quickly, so just try to
avoid it as much as possible. If you've been watching my videos for almost a year now, you know that in the beginning of the project I started making shoulder pads from layered pieces of fabric, which are going to have a comeback once I make a look number 6 that does feature those shoulder pads. I actually cut about like 20 layers of fabric with my regular fabric scissors, and they handled it pretty well, but that's because I have Kai scissors, which are very strong Japanese steel, and they're sort of meant for this very heavy duty work. Obviously that would be best if I avoided this, because after that I kind of had to sharpen them again, and sharpening fabric scissors is not something you really want to do, and you want to try to avoid it again as much as possible, just because they never come back to the true sharpness form. And then once you sharpen them once, you're going to have to sharpen them every couple of months after that, which is not a terribly big deal, but if you can avoid doing that for the longest time, you better do it. I'll update you a little later.
This is usually how I take photos of products in the backyard. I just take one of the larger white canvases that my mom has and just take photos when it is harsh daylight and I see harsh shadows. That's just because I like shadows on photos, but if you prefer to have no shadows or a less harsh lighting, then just pick golden hour in sunset or in sundawn. Usually that's the prettiest time. Some of the embroidery on this bag is not perfect, and as you can see, that side piece doesn't really lie flat, but I'm still happy with how it turned out so far. If you're wondering, I stitched the actual paper clips over with an embroidery thread. It took a while, but it was quite a therapeutic process. If I were to change anything, I would probably not take a metal zipper. The only reason I took a metal zipper because it is a bit more sustainable, but in the long run it doesn't really lie flat as much as I would love it to be. So I would also add side pieces to the places where the handle meets the actual bag, because it is looking bulky, and now I realize why some of the bags in a similar shape are made differently.